Before we get into the episode today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered on and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educators who are tuning in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Educator Yarns. Today, I'm joined by Kat Fulford, and before I introduce her, I am going to say an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are gathered on today and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educators that are tuning in. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to introduce Kat just so you know who you'll be listening to today. And Kat began her career in agricultural industry before retaining in early childhood education after having her 3 children. With the diploma in hand, she spent 7 years working across sessional kindergarten, daycare and out of school hours care. And in 2022, she embarked on further studies pursuing a bachelor's degree in early childhood teaching and is currently teaching 3 and 4-year-old kinder. Her deep love for the country originates from extensive travel with her family during her childhood, a passion she wishes to share with the children she teaches. Kat believes in honouring the land by learning its history and integrating the valuable teachings of the First Nations people into the everyday operations of educational services. She aims to learn alongside the children about the country's past with the hope that it will contribute to healing the future, a vision that guides her work today. Welcome, Kat, to our podcast.
Thanks, Jess. It's great to be here.
Do you want to give a little bit of context as to the sort of geographical location of where you're teaching for people that are listening?
Yeah, sure. So I'm in Ararat in Victoria. So we're sort of at the base of, well, just near the Grampians. So I'm on Djapurrung country. And yeah, it's a lovely little place. Come visit.
Yes, it is beautiful. I went to the Grampians actually at the end of last year. Did some work. Do you know Kerry Douglas and Alicia Hanson? No?
I know Alicia,
You
yeah.
know Alicia? Yeah, so Alicia's a great ally and tutor that I've worked with in this space for ages. So anyways, I did a trip. Actually, Kerry's not in the Grampians, but I went from there to where Alicia is. But anyway, so you've shared a bit about your educational journey, but I'd like to ask what inspired you to focus on Aboriginal education in your practice?
Jess, I think that our land is just the most amazing thing. And I am a big believer in our country and our country having a story. So I wanted to pass on our country story, and I don't think there's any way we can pass on our country story without including Indigenous perspectives into what is Australia. So that's really where I started, and it sort of started, I guess, as a rabbit hole. I sort of wanted to learn a little bit more, and then I wanted to learn a little bit more, and I wanted to learn a little bit more. And I kind of found at times it was hard to find the information I was looking for. So I felt that if I found something, I should share it with anyone who'd listen to make it easier for them to start to find out some information.
And so have you found many challenges along your way in finding that information or getting others on board with you?
So when I started my diploma way back in 2015, it was actually really hard to find any information about our local land. So the teacher I was working with at the time, we worked together to find out what we could. And then things started to get a little bit easier. And I sort of feel like the more people know that you want the information, the easier it is to find. So it's just putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and saying, I don't know something. Can someone help me and tell me?
Yeah, I feel like once you find that first little thread, then it leads on to the next, to the next, and the next. It's just about finding that first little hook of where you can hook into. I feel like when I'm a big believer of when you put things out into the universe, that they will come to you.
Yeah.
Was there a pivotal moment in your career that significantly impacted your approach to Aboriginal education?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when I started my diploma, we started at our kinder, we introduced an acknowledgement of country and we did it with the children. And then the year later, one of our children came back for a service tour with their sibling. And that child came up and said, Kat, I'm so cross at my school. We don't even acknowledge the Aboriginal people, and it's still Djapurrung land. And I thought, oh my goodness, this little person is 5 and they sort of get what so many people don't. And from then I thought, you know, it's planting that seed. If you plant a seed and the children want to learn, they'll continue to learn. And then that's how we're going to change generations to come. So
Mm.
yeah, there was that moment. And another was quite recently conducting our start of year parent interviews, and a parent who came in and was Aboriginal unbeknown, I didn't realize, but they came in and they said to me, "Oh, we knew we'd found the right kinder. Look at your shirt." Because I had a shirt on from Yarn that had the Indigenous pattern on it. "Look at your shirt. We know our children will be safe here." And I'd never sort of thought of my uniform as any more than just what I chose to wear to work. But yeah,
Yeah. It's those little things that are really impacting, right? And it's one of the whys that even if you have non-Indigenous children that are attending your service, it's still really relevant and it resonates with them because then they go on and champion and advocate for respect for traditional owners in their primary school and secondary school and workplaces and family, that they're going out and championing it. And I love that they're like that ripple effect that comes out of early childhood is like
yeah.
really quite um it's beautiful to see. And I hear so much of it.
It's
And
amazing. My own children actually have taken to their high school and told them that they they want more Aboriginal teaching. They want to learn more. And they say, why do we have to learn histories of other countries? We want to learn about ours. And I just think, that's how we're going to change things by helping our children learn.
yeah, and to voice that, because I think that's exactly what so many educators that say to me what they feel. They feel that they know more about ancient Egypt and Rome than what they do about our own country's history, right? So, um, and wish that they were probably told more than what they were during their schooling. Can I ask, what does embedded practices look like in your curriculum now? What are some things that you do?
I actually like to try and challenge myself and my educators to put a sprinkling of something in everything. So we do things, we actually got in contact with our local members. So now we have flags that hang in our kinder, proudly hang there. So we have the Aboriginal flag, the Australian flag, and the Torres Strait Islander flag. There's a lot of nature because we can bring the outside inside, and we can share the country that way with our children. I like to take the time for our children to spend time outside and just observe our country. We've looked at all sorts of different foods, native bush tuckers. We spend a lot of time looking at the seasons of Garawid, of the Grampians. So that's embedded into our curriculum. Um, yeah, like I said, I just try and put a little bit in everything. I think that there's not really anything that we teach that we can't add some Indigenous perspective to.
Well, grounding your program in Aboriginal seasons, I think, is really good place-based pedagogy and a really simple way that we can teach through culture. And even if I think a lot of people that were listening, they'll be asking, well, how do we go about finding the seasons of where we are? And not everywhere has documented seasons, as I'm sure you know. But what we tell people is that if you find plants that are endemic to your area and you observe their growth cycles and then observe what else is happening around you at that time, like is it hot? Is it dry? Is it wet season? Is it really windy? So matching that with the growth that you see in the cycles of the plants that you have in your yard, and then what animals are coming into your yard during that time. So I know, like for us at the moment, we have heaps of lily pillies that are growing in our garden. We also have heaps of little wattle birds that are coming in to feed off the blossoms that are on the lily pillies. We also have quite a lot of snakes. The cicadas are dying off. They're not as vocal at the moment. And we've also had lots of bush turkeys digging up the grubs from the wet rains that we've had, or the summer rains that we've had, as well as wallabies coming in and eating some of our warrigal greens and so forth. So I can see during the time that the lily pilly is abundant that these are animals and birds that I'm also seeing frequenting my area. So I think it's about becoming an observer in how you connect with country and the rhythms and patterns that you're seeing on country.
Absolutely. And I think that it's so much more relevant than what the colonial calendar is. For instance, at the moment, and unfortunately it was the same last year, we're in the season of Kuyang, which is the eel season, but we don't have a lot of waterways here, but it's also the season of bushfires, and the bushfires are currently burning in the Grampians, and it was the same at this time last year. So it's really something that is we can make really obvious to the children.
Yeah. Sometimes I see people do like season displays in their early learning service where it's based on, January, February, March, April, May, but then just observing whether it's photographs of things that they've looked at and then comparing them year on year. So is it exactly the same? Are you seeing those reoccurring patterns? And how can you extend upon that? And it's interesting. So like, yeah, looking at fire, and then that becomes a center point. So how do we take care of country with fire? And what do animals do when there's a bushfire? And what can we do if there's a bushfire? And
Yeah.
like, fire is not always a bad thing. Our
Yeah.
plants need fire to germinate and all that sort of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
and that's sort of with the fires here, it's every day has been smoky, and so it's really in the front of the children's mind, and it's sort of teaching them too that it's not always scary. We don't have to be scared of it. It does have positive benefits, and what it's doing for our country and how the country will heal and it will grow from the fire.
Hmm. And that's the difference between learning with country and learning on country, like you're walking with and not on.
Yeah.
So and that relationship that you're getting children to have. And I've had services say to me, well, we don't take children out of the gate because there are snakes. And it's like, well, that's right, there are snakes and this is their home, but that doesn't mean that you have to avoid it. So there's it to me, it's risk benefit play. So that there are snakes, so how do we teach children about snake safety, and what are you going to do to check about snakes and all that kind of stuff? So I don't think we have to avoid on country programs because of these things, but it's about being mindful and knowledgeable about the winds and what direction they're blowing and what will happen and where the fires are and doing your checks and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
yeah, all exciting stuff. Um, is there a particular resource or program that you have discovered in your journey that's been beneficial to you?
I have a friend who does a lot of volunteer work in the Royal Cranbourne Gardens, and they have some really wonderful resources, particularly around the plants and things like that. One of the things that I am so very excited about is last year in the Pechian season, which is the wildflower season, we were able to get some wildflower seedlings given to us from the Cranbourne Gardens. So I was able to bring them in, and we had some some chocolate lilies and some bulbine lilies, and we were able to talk to the children about how they were a food source. And then we planted them in our own garden, and the children started looking after them and caring for them. Then we were given some Tangel's daisy seedlings, which is a daisy that there's not very many left. So I think there was only 200 or so left in the wild, and it's part of the Cranbourne Gardens Raising Rarity program. So we were able to plant those and talk about how if we could get them to grow and we could look after the plant, they'll be around for forever for our children and their children to see. And so it became a real intergenerational sustainability program from the Royal Cranbourne Gardens.
That's
Um,
such a good relationship to forge in your community, right?
yeah, and it's such there's quite a bit of a distance between us, and I think that that's the thing too. Sometimes you do have to put yourself out, and you might have to travel, or you might have to do things in your own time, but really you can benefit everyone in doing those things. So yeah, our little daisies are growing well, and we've collected some seeds. So this year we're going to look at trying to get the seeds to grow so we can start the cycle again, and hopefully, yeah, these little flowers that are so rare, we can get to grow, and then we won't lose them.
That's so cool. And I
Yeah.
think like so people that aren't aware that are listening, like you're semi like rural and regional there. Like I did a public workshop in the Grampians. It was on like a goat farm.
Yes, I was there. Yeah.
That was our venue,
Yeah.
right? And it was a beautiful venue, like it was a wedding venue and stuff, and it was so nice. But like it's a pretty regional, area. And so when you are regional like that, you can't just think of local as being 5 minutes around your service, like you need to
Yeah.
look much, much further than that. And I always tell people that like within the Wiradjuri Nation, which is where my family's from, to travel from one end of it to the other is a couple of hours. And so if we're going to community events within the nation, like local is a distance, like it's a
Yeah.
couple of hours. And that's the same as service providers. Like we don't just work with services that are in our immediate suburb. We work, further than that. And a lot of our service providers do. So not limiting yourself and your resources and relationships to just your immediate, neighborhood block, I think is an
Yeah,
important
yeah.
thing for
You've
people to understand.
got to look that little bit further, and when you do, you can discover some amazing things that are still relevant to where you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm just jumping in quickly to remind you all that Beck and I have a series of upcoming events and workshops all throughout Queensland where we'll be yarning about the new ELF principles, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, and sustainability. We'll be in Toowoomba, Cairns, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Mackay, Townsville, you name it, we'll be there. And we hope to see you all there. All right, take care, everyone. Enjoy the episode. Would you like to highlight? I know that's an example of a great project that you've done, but another initiative that you've led that you're particularly proud of and what's made it successful?
So when we decided to do an acknowledgement of country, and I really wanted the children to be part of it and to really make it their own. So to do that, we had to really do some learning about what country is. April Clark has some really great books, Walking on Country, What Do You Hear? And Walking on Country, What Do You See? So we read those books and then we looked at kinder country and what our kinder country was and what was important to the children and what they could see and what they could hear. And it was really amazing, their ideas. There was one little person who came out and their idea of listening to the country was laying on the ground with their ear on the ground and seeing what they could hear. And they could hear the worms under the ground. So it was just that real connections that they could do things. So but the children were able to come up with our acknowledgement that talks about the birds and the trees and how when we take care of them, they'll take care of us. And I just thought these were the words of the children, and that was really special to me.
Yeah, I bet you were proud. That's
I
so
certainly
beautiful.
was, yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I think taking time to really investigate what country is and not just, like the generic things that we say, we pay our respects to traditional owners and da, 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 I think, but to really bring that back to where you are and where are we and what is your connection and your relationship and what does that word custodianship mean and what does reciprocity with country mean?
Yeah,
Those are all things that you're unpacking. That's really beautiful. Have you had many challenges
I
in
have
your
had a
journey?
few over the time, just different ones, and they've affected me differently. I've had some challenges with parents and authorities and community around, why are we doing these things? And they're really tricky conversations, but I think that the communication is the most important thing, just to communicate the message behind everything and why we're doing it and why it's important and why I won't stop.
Mm,
I'm not going to stop because somebody doesn't like it. I just think it's far too important
mm,
to just stop. Um, Another one that was a challenge that really pulled my heartstring was an Indigenous child, and all mum wanted to do was teach language. And when it's a dead language, just how it just really pulled at my heartstrings that these people were just trying to teach their son his history and just couldn't.
mm,
And I guess I was able to sort of relate it back to myself, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like. And then I thought, this is why this work is important, so we don't lose these massively important things.
mm. Yeah, that language preservation is a huge thing, and it's not just something that happens to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Like the loss of mother tongue and mother languages, right around the world is a huge thing. And I always tell people the loss of the language is the loss of the culture itself, because without it, there's only so much of your culture you have access to. Like I don't speak Wiradjuri language, and I'm really lucky that there are courses and there are resources available to me, and there are lots of fluent speakers that I can tap into. Um, that have access to that, but there are some where it's already gone, and
Mm.
that links back to knowing our history, and people were jailed for speaking their language and it was forbidden to do so, and um, And then when you see people that migrate to Australia who stop speaking their mother tongue to their children because they see English as being the key to academic success, I say, please don't do that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like they're going to get English at school when they turn on the TV, when they listen to the radio in the car, they're going to get English. They can only get language from you, and it's so important that you keep that for them.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that is sad, and I'm sorry that to hear that that was like a setback for that particular family because
Yeah.
it's a really sad thing. Um, can I ask with the family that you were speaking about, do you think that that goes to them having misconceptions about Aboriginal culture and history, or do you feel that it comes from the view of, it's political correctness gone mad, like it's a lack of understanding or a bias or prejudice? Where do you think that comes from?
They are very, they do a lot with their culture and they are really involved with their culture. It's just that all the years ago, the terrible things that had happened and the language has now become a dead
Oh,
language.
sorry, not the language. I
Oh,
meant
sorry.
the other family that you were speaking about initially that was questioning why you were doing what you were doing and so forth.
Yeah. So now
Yeah.
that one, that was about politics and not wanting to put bias on the children, um, which okay. So it was
Mm,
just about not wanting the children to learn political things. And I guess it really came back to that whitewashing. They just
mm.
wanted the nice, clean version of everything that went on. And I think one of the things that in the past I've been told is I want my child to learn Australian history. And I come back to we can't learn Australian history. If Australian history to me is the Aboriginal history, it's
This is
that's
your history.
Australia
That's right.
from
This is part of your history. What are you talking about?
yeah, that's Australia from the get-go. And yeah, so
Can I
it's
say,
that
like, I think this is a
whitewashing.
very common thing that people sometimes feel that by learning Aboriginal history that it negates the other. Or if
Yeah,
we say that this injustice happened to Aboriginal people, that we're therefore saying that injustices and bad things didn't happen to other people. And that's simply not the case. So one of the books, it's on my desk, people that probably can't see it, my background's blurred anyway, but it's a book by Anne Kerr. Um, she was also the author of the book Sorry, Sorry. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but
yeah,
this one by Anne Kerr is called The Convict Children. And it talks about how, the convicts came and they weren't brought here by choice. And these children were also convicts that had been taken from their families off the streets of London and were put on these ships and they were brought here and they were mistreated. And they have a story too, and it's a story worth knowing. And it's like that's it's part of our country's history. And so I also have books like this about the convicts and the First Fleet and that they came over and it wasn't by choice and they didn't, all this sort of stuff. But I feel like that's a big thing that people sort of feel it's this thing like, well, what about me? What about my culture? What about my history? It's not
yeah,
just about the Aboriginal people and your culture and history. And I feel like saying, well, you're absolutely right. It's not. It's about all of us, isn't it?
yeah,
Um, and all the ways that we go about teaching Aboriginal culture and history, it's exactly the same for any other culture. The reason why we do it might be different. So we generally teach Aboriginal culture regardless if we have Aboriginal children, but potentially we wouldn't be teaching Italian culture if you didn't have Italian children. We tend to focus on the demographic of the children that we have in the classroom, right? But
yeah,
it's exactly the same way that the way that we go about that inclusion.
yeah.
So
I
sometimes,
often,
yeah,
sorry, I was going to say, I often wonder whether shame comes into it a lot too, whether people are ashamed of our history and if we just forget about it, then it didn't happen, and I think it's a bit
yeah.
sad because, yeah,
I think
it,
there is a shame, and I think there's also this thing. It's like it's not our fault. Like we didn't do
yes,
it,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
sort of think, well, that comes back to empathy, doesn't it? Like if I told you that
absolutely.
I had a family member that was sick, you would say, "I'm really sorry to hear that," and nobody's saying that you caused them to be unwell, but
Yeah,
you still have empathy for me as a person that's happening or that's happened, right? So I think to me, it's about empathy, but I think the other part is I honestly think that sometimes there's a real lack of awareness
yeah,
or education. I think we take for granted sometimes in early childhood. This is part of our curriculum. We have had a lot of professional development or resources and research and understanding sort of being done over the last, particularly 10 years, I would say,
yeah,
in our profession to sort of really uplift this. And it's part of our TAFE courses, uni degrees, all of these things now. Whereas in other professions, it's not. like it's just not. So they're just going off whatever little they were taught in primary school and high school, which if it's what I was taught was one lesson, in
Not
12
much more.
years, it's nothing, and whatever their families have told them, and they've just gone on knowing that they've never had that catalyst to stop and reflect and to unlearn or relearn. And that's why many of them, for the first time, they're being provoked or prompted by their 3 and 4-year-old children who are coming home and talking about it after attending preschool. And potentially that's confronting.
Yeah, exactly. It's, the children may potentially know more than what their parents do. And yeah, which is an amazing thing, but it's also
Mm.
probably for parents quite confronting, like you said.
Yeah, I think it's one of the reasons why there's such a push, like when we have reconciliation action plans, to bring families along on that journey with us and to celebrate the RAP progress, because not everybody has that provocation in their personal, professional lives to reflect. So, and I know I've just got back from the South Coast and they've got a lot of families. They're both services I visited. They're part of the university and TAFE campuses down there. They've got a lot of students that, new to Australia or English as a second language, and they don't know what the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flag, what the colours represent. They don't know what a
No.
welcome to country or an acknowledgement of country is. So having those sort of wrap displays where we're talking about each of the actions and what they mean, and it's sort of like a did you know section, that this is what it means, it's part of that education. And potentially some families or parents, they're too embarrassed to ask, because they think, well, we should already know this, and we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, can you talk a little bit about some of the relationships that you have with Aboriginal people in your local community?
So I started off, like I said before, where we found it really hard to make any contact with anyone. So just putting myself out there, I've been able to make contact with so through the service with our KESOs and our KECs, I have some Indigenous children, and just their families feeling comfortable and knowing that we're open and wanting to learn. The families are happy to give us ideas and to share stories and to share contacts. There's so many acronyms. I always find there's so many acronyms.
I know, and that's what I was going to say to you. I was going to stop you and be like, because you're in Victoria, so like you're saying like KESO and stuff. So not everybody knows
Yes.
what that is. So like a KESO is a Koori Education Support Officer,
Yeah.
and predominantly they work with primaries, right? But sometimes you'll have a KESO who's very passionate and will come in and spend some time with early childhood services
Yeah.
as well. Kerry
Our
Douglas, who I
KESOs,
mentioned at the beginning,
yeah.
she's great for that. She's known for that too. Yeah,
Yeah, our KESOs are great. We see our KESO quite a bit. Like they
amazing.
do always probably once a term pop in to the services and just, hi, here I am. Um, through VAI, I've been able to make some contacts as well, and it's been really exciting to get to know April Clark as a Djapurrung woman, to be able to actually meet someone who is from our land, to be able to share some stories, and she's amazing. There's no such thing as a stupid question, just the one you don't ask. And so she's been really fantastic to get to talk to. And yeah.
I think VAI itself has got some really great resources. And often when we're working with preschools and so forth in Victoria on their curriculum and developing their community stakeholders list, VAI is one of the top that we'll say.
Yeah.
As well as your local AECG, so your local Aboriginal Education Consultative Groups, your KESO workers. But Victoria is so lucky. You've got so many organisations. You've got VACL, which is Victorian Aboriginal Coalition of Languages. There's so much. You've got VACA, which is Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Association, something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
It's welcome to the world of acronyms, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been envious of Victorian organisations and services for such a long time, because you're well ahead of most states, I would say, and your services that you've got available to tap into, which is great. Just I wouldn't want to take that away from you. I just wish that everybody else had it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
There's lots and lots of help out there when you find it and go looking.
yeah, and I think sitting down and creating that community stakeholders list and mapping out who's who, what do they do, and who is the correct person to be reaching out to for what. Reaching out to me to learn about local protocols when you're in Victoria is not the right thing to do, But about curriculum and stuff, I definitely can help, but it's about just understanding the different roles that everybody has to play, because we're very clear, I suppose, on what is our role and not to overstep culturally or
Yeah.
professionally into somebody else's space. Have you got questions about nature play, sustainability, or how to meaningfully include Aboriginal culture in your early childhood program? Call 0253 000 306 and leave a voice message for the Educator Yarns podcast. Beck Burch from Bush Kindy's Australia and Jessica Staines from the Koori curriculum will be answering your questions, offering practical advice, cultural guidance, and inspiring ideas to support your teaching and planning. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your program deeper, your question could shape future episodes and support other educators across the country. Dial in today at 0253 000 306. I know that you've mentioned April Clark, but is there any other person that you'd like to shout out to that's inspired you on your journey?
So through my journey, I guess with my background in ag, I absolutely loved reading Bruce Pascoe's book Dark Emu, and it really resonated with me personally and the way I felt about our country from the get-go. Tyson Yakapunda's book Sand Talk was also something that I thought was just absolutely worth listening to. I actually listened to it as an audio book, and his voice was just amazing. I could have just quite listened to his dreamy voice for a long time. Also Miriam Rose Ungunma and her Dadiri, we're rolling the pre-prep program out this year. So our cohort of 4-year-olds are going into 30 hours of preps this year, which is 30 hours of kindergarten, which is quite scary. The whole thing's very for me, I find it really scary. I don't know what to do. But when I look back at Dadiri, I just sit there and I think, you know what? I don't feel that I should have to do or the children need more than what we did. I think we should honor them and slow the pedagogy and give them that chance to grow with the pedagogy and make it not so much about we're there for double the time, we should learn double the things, but make it more about being able to actually sit with things and let things resonate and let children grow with it and just make it an organic movement and make it a flow that happens naturally. So I've read Dadiri so many times. I did read it a lot through uni, but actually feel like this is my Dadiri year. You know, we're just going to let it happen. It talks in it about if our listeners haven't listened to or read it, things like a river may have no water, but if you wait, the water will come and then the river will start as a trickle and it'll turn back into a river and then it may cycle back and dry up again. And I think that sometimes maybe we push children to do things quickly because we want to get them out of the way and done. Where I'm hoping this year with our pre-prep, these children will have more time to honor things, to really sit with them and understand them and to let things have their flow and have their beginning and have their end or to continue whichever way things go.
Mm. I think that's beautiful. I think slow pedagogy is the most impactful and giving children opportunities to delve deeper and to revisit and take their time and not be rushed through. I think early childhood is the one time in life that we don't have to rush through. There'll be lots of time to be rushed. And I
Yeah,
think this is the time
exactly.
just to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, Jess, you and your Koori curriculum are amazing.
Thanks.
Like we mentioned before on the goat farm, I remember coming and doing the embedding Aboriginal perspectives course with you and I have always said to people the one thing that I remember most from that is somebody asked, what if we get it wrong? And you just said to them, you know, you've tried. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong and you do it the right way from then on. And I just think that's something that has stuck with me since the very beginning of my career. It's just, you know what, trying is still a positive direction. If we
Yeah,
get it wrong, once you know that you're doing it wrong, you just do it right or learn something. And I mean, we're all still learning. There's so much to learn. And I think that if you go into things with a closed mind, then that's where we're going to have issues. I'm happy to say that I can learn things every day. I learned the other day, just last week, that our town actually has part of our town is Jabberong land, where part of our town is actually no man's land. It doesn't have a traditional owner because it's part of the area that makes up the Grampians, where there was a lot of mob came together, so it just got left without a traditional custodian, traditional owner. It's everyone's land.
I think that's it. I think with Aboriginal programs, there's no such thing as competency and being competent, because the culture is ever evolving. It's fluid, it's not fixed, and we move with it. And there's so much to learn, there's so much to know. And, even when you look at our dreaming stories, there's like what we're told as children versus told what we're adults, versus like when you've gone through law and senior stories and understanding how all of those stories connect up.
Yeah.
And different mobs' versions of the same story, but it's still different, so I think it's never ending what you can learn, and it's about being open, and not having rigid thinking, but also not feeling like you have to rush through. As you've said, like we've said, that slow pedagogy is best for children. It's also what's best for us
Yeah,
as adults.
absolutely.
Like it's not a race to get done and it's not a tick a box thing. Yeah, so many gems in what you're saying.
And I think that everything I've ever learned from the very start, from our very first question about my becoming this journey to teach children to incorporate and embed all the Aboriginal perspectives, it has been a slow journey, but we're still going. It's not something that I'm going to finish right now and then that's it. That's all I need to know. I know everything. It's just that's being okay with it being a slow journey and being okay with not knowing the answer to a question, but asking the question, because I feel like if you ask the question, the answer will eventually come back to you. Someone will say, "Hey, Kat was wondering about this, that, or the other." Oh yeah, and then eventually it'll come back and you get the answers, but you might not get them straight away.
Yeah, it's that non-linear learning.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. If there's one thing that you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today, what would you want it to be?
Yes, it would be 100% what you told me way back then on the goat farm, that you can't get it wrong. Trying and starting, just start. And then if you find out that what you're doing isn't the done way or it's not the right thing, acknowledging that and acknowledging that it's okay to have not done it the right way, but you've started, and then do it the right way from then on. Keep taking those steps forward and not steps backwards, and just that you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to travel those hundreds of kilometers to go somewhere to learn something, or you've got to make yourself feel uncomfortable by saying, I don't know. Nobody thinks less of you for doing those things. Nobody thinks less of us as educators when we say we don't know something. And children are not scared to learn alongside us. It's quite exciting for them when they're learning it with us. And we don't have to be that there is no power struggle where I have the knowledge and they don't. We can share it together. And that creates really special relationships with the children.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Kat, for jumping on and yarning with us. I feel like we've had a great yarn. I feel like I found like a like-minded person. I love it when I find someone who's just like, yes, I love
No,
that book.
fantastic.
And I love that practice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, if you're ever out this way again, call in and see us. We'd love that.
Well, everyone knows that I get my Ks up. I'm a frequent flyer, so I probably will be back there sometime soon, I would say. But thanks, Kat, and congratulations again on your nomination.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Take care. Thanks for listening to today's podcast. To find out more information about the Koori curriculum and how we can best support you in your early learning service, visit www.kooricurriculum.com.